really early childhood education, which is a good investment. We need to make sure that they're making a living wage. So that is an issue that I have heard a lot of concern about even before the pandemic, but is so much more important now. The pandemic has highlighted a lot of these inequities. So a lot of these dedicated childcare workers have college degrees and student loans. So we need to make sure that they're making enough to pay back their student loans, but also to provide good quality early childhood education. I'm working with Senator Warren on the Senate side and a lot of my colleagues on the House side to get this piece in place so that we can see our economy when it's ready to come back and people are going back to work, that we are investing in our children. And speaking of children, I don't know if you saw yesterday, the President and Secretary DeVos ordered that schools open. I want to say that is not Trump and DeVos's role to play. They don't get to say when our schools open, and we need to make sure that our schools can open safely. President threatened to withhold federal funding. He can't do that. Congress has the power of the purse string, and he can't just decide that appropriated money from Congress can't go to the schools because they're not doing what he says. We need to make sure that our students are safe, that our educators and people who work in our schools are safe, and that has to be done with input from healthcare professionals and educators and families. The administration is also pressuring our colleges and universities by threatening to deport international students if the colleges and universities don't offer live classes, open up and offer live classes. He can't do that either. It's really short-sighted. Our international students bring a lot to the table, but they also pay tuition. And so again, another short-sighted idea by this administration. So November can't come soon enough. I know that Kurt and I are both hoping that we maintain our majority, and we have a lot of great candidates who won in 2018 who are the reason we're in the majority, and a lot of amazing candidates running for so many open seats. There's a lot of Republicans kind of just jumping ship and moving on. So there's a lot of open seats that we could pick up. So that's a summary of some of the work that I've been doing and we've been doing in Congress, and I look forward to hearing from Kurt and hearing your questions and having a conversation. Thanks again.
Thank you, Suzanne. Kurt? You're muted.
Here, make sure I don't step on Suzanne's toes.
Okay.
Thank you all for having us both. Nice to see everybody again, albeit virtually. It seems to be the new norm. We're getting Zoom to death, all of us these days, but I guess we better just get used to it. At least it's a way to stay in contact, and I and Suzanne both, I know, appreciate that. I think Suzanne covered some of the big ticket items pretty well. The Justice Policing Act, you know, the infrastructure bill that we put forward and stuff. And we actually also been working on Affordable Care Act and trying to make sure, since this epidemic and even prior to the epidemic, that everyone that needed health care had access to affordable health care. And I've been working to try and make sure that as you transition from your job onto Medicare, that you don't fall into a gap in the program and don't have insurance for several years. And we're going to be working on that next week. So we're trying to do things, as Suzanne indicated, looking forward. COVID has sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room. We spent an amazing, just unbelievable amount of money to keep our country in place. It looks like it's working. The jobs numbers look much, much better than I think anybody anticipated. But I frankly think Suzanne, myself, and the rest of your United States Congress stepped up when times are the toughest and put some of our partisan differences aside and put a $3 trillion package out there. I mean, that's unheard of. I would never have expected my Republican colleagues to vote for anything like that. But we did, and we supported businesses. Sometimes Democrats get after businesses, but they are the employers. And together put out a pretty good package. It kept businesses operating, a lifeline to a lot of folks that couldn't afford to stay home with their children. or with others. And so it's a pretty amazing thing to work on. Been working a lot on that, but that was probably March, April, May, as we worked really, really hard. Suzanne and I both, talking to a lot of folks all the time, whether the local community leaders, elected officials, school folks, businessmen and women, you name it, just to try and make sure we had the right pulse and could make adjustments with there. I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, as Veronica pointed out. Pretty wide purview. Most legislation in Congress goes to our committee. I hope to see some of Suzanne's select committee stuff come forward here. A lot of really good stuff. We're working, myself, with a Republican colleague of mine, actually from West Virginia, on a bill that gets power plants to near zero emissions by mid-century, just as Suzanne was talking about. I think we're the only bipartisan bill that's out there, and hopefully we can get people, gathering around that as a realistic solution. We got businesses on board, environmental groups on board. So for those that think there's no opportunity, I think there actually is. And to Suzanne's point, I think we need to look forward beyond this particular crisis. COVID's going to be with us for a long, long time, and we got to learn how to coexist with it, not let it dictate our lives to it. And I think that's why we're moving forward on some of these issues. The committee's had some pretty interesting hearings. We had an interesting on how COVID and the marketplace is affecting the energy sector. A lot of flux there, opportunities for new jobs in renewable energy industries across the country, and particularly here in Oregon, where we're a leader. Trying to electrify, our transportation fleet. There's some of that in our infrastructure bill that Peter DeFazio put out. Pretty darn exciting. There was an interesting hearing on disinformation on the internet. Disinformation, internet, we don't get any of that, do we? But it was very interesting to see where the two parties took it. The Republicans, of course, very concerned that this is just all these Hollywood guys and tech gurus are going after their conservative channels, and on the progressive side, a lot of folks are worried that they're targeting African Americans, minority populations, as susceptible to more disinformation. I think we're all, frankly, very susceptible. So shining a light, transparency, it seems like a great opportunity there to help Americans and Oregonians in particular make informed decisions without trampling on that pesky little First Amendment that we love, so that we can get a little information here and there. Had a very good hearing the other day on mental health. As you know, the suicide rates, unfortunately, are up. The call lines are very busy. I guess if there's a silver lining that seems to be coming through is that mental health experts, as well as folks wanting mental health assistance, are finding the phone lines and video very comfortable to use. And matter of fact, I was on the phone earlier today with some of our mental health professionals, and they were saying the no-shows for appointments are way down. People are actually following through on their very much needed appointments, getting the health care they need. And so telemedicine has really been showing its strength, I think, and why we've got to make sure that telemedicine, some of the waivers that we currently have, stay in place, both on the physical health side as well as on the mental health side. It's pretty exciting, and the testimony was pretty compelling. We also had a hearing just yesterday, day before, on tribal needs. Our tribal communities sometimes appear to be neglected. We're trying very much not to do that. We're shining a light on some of their needs in the healthcare arena. I spent some time with some of our tribal nations talking about how the ACA has improved there a lot. The Indian Health Act was reaffirmed when we reauthorized and passed the Affordable Care Act 10 years ago. Some of my Republican colleagues have waxed eloquent about some of the tribal communities' needs, Indian country, forget that a lot of their health care is wrapped up in the ACA, not just on the Medicaid piece, but on the reauthorization of the tribal healthcare programs that are out there. It's been pretty busy time. We're looking to go back next week. I've got a couple of committee hearings and a markup. I hope to go back over the weekend and show up in person and do my appropriate physical distancing and masking, least that we can do to show a little respect for one another and hopefully curb some of the increases we're seeing at least in our state, if not nationally, so businesses can stay open and people can go to work and our kids can go back to school. So with that, I'll be quiet and answer questions. But you're on mute now, Veronica.
Okay, there we go. Before we get to the Q&A, I do want to acknowledge some of the elected officials that have joined us today, and also some of the candidates, because that is the season. So first of all, I would like to welcome Senator Rob Wagner. Glad to have you. Also, Representative Margaret Doherty is with us. Neelam Gupta, who is I believe a new member of the Lake Oswego School Board and is going to be running for re-election. Bridget Brooks, Tualatin City Council. Deb Patterson is with us from Salem. She is a candidate for Senate District 10, a very important seat for us to pick up for the Oregon Senate this year. Garrett Rosenthal, who is running for Metro District 3. In an attempt to get somebody who believes in climate change onto Metro representing that district, as opposed to the gentleman who is stepping away. And Kimberly Culbertson, I believe, is with us from Hillsborough, running for Hillsborough City Council. If you are a candidate and I missed you, or you're an elected and I missed you, please drop me a note in the chat and I will do my best to get to you. With that, we will take questions. So there's two ways of asking questions. If you're familiar with how to raise your hand on Zoom, please feel free to do that and I will call on you. And otherwise you can put a note in the chat and I will pick it up from there. So whichever one works best for you. I'm gonna start out with a couple questions that were sent into me kind of ahead of time. One question came from a member, and I don't really know if this is being discussed at all or not, but as you're both aware, when people do not sign up for everything that they should sign up for initially when they are eligible for Medicare, subsequent signups require a penalty, sort of irrespective of the reason that they fail to sign up for them. So in the conversations, are the issues of Medicare penalties, are they coming up at all in the healthcare discussions?
Oh, absolutely. We're marking a bill up, I think, next week that gets to that. I'm trying to get an amendment in on one of my solutions that I referenced. One of the big ones is COBRA. You sign up for your COBRA insurance through your business that you're now leaving. You can keep your insurance for a year or two if you were willing to pay the freight on that. And we're trying to make sure that happens. There are those folks that will get dropped or lose their job, especially right now with the COVID thing, and they want to sign up for their insurance plan that they like before going on to Medicare. And maybe they can, maybe they can't. Then when they decide they want to go to Medicare, they try and go, and there's no opening. The season isn't open for enrollment. It causes a huge problem. So we're trying to shine a light on some of those problems that are out there, make it so it's a little more seamless, that no matter when you lose your coverage with your business or whatever, you can automatically sign up for Medicare without a penalty, because those penalties can be pretty awesome, pretty abusive, and they add up a lot over time. So we're trying to make sure that there's work in there. If you guys have other solutions that you think we need to be looking at, please let my office know.
Great, thank you. Suzanne, did you have any comments on that one?
No, just to add to, thank you, Kurt. I know that most of those healthcare issues go through Energy and Commerce. The Education and Labor Committee have a piece of healthcare because we do employer-provided healthcare. I think we're seeing, especially during the pandemic, the challenges of employer-provided healthcare because so many people are now separated from their employer. They also lose their health coverage. So there are some proposals, well, in addition to the sort of universal healthcare, Medicare for all type proposals, there's also a proposal to look at, as coronavirus continues and we're still in this COVID, to look at instead of piecing together all of this aid with giving some aid to the businesses, and then we actually helped pay, have legislation to help people pay their COBRA if they're separated from their employer, to instead have something called the paycheck recovery, which is a model that's been used in other countries to help keep things going during the coronavirus pandemic, to instead of breaking it up, just paying people's salaries while they're out of work because of the coronavirus. It actually, in the long term, saves resources because then people are not separated from their insurance. So I know it's related, but not identical to the issue that of the Medicare penalties. I think just in general that our healthcare system is broken. It's way too complicated and way too expensive for too many people. And the Medicare penalties are just one piece of evidence of that.
Thank you. Suzanne, this is a question for you from Representative Margaret Doherty.
Hi, Margaret. Hi, Representative Doherty.
She said, what can we tell our districts and our students about what the Secretary of Education and the President are saying about funding and closure? You touched on it. Is that the message we can use? Thank you for everything.
Of course. Thank you, Representative. Well, certainly this is evolving. I know just yesterday, the President and the Secretary said schools need to open, and they threatened to withhold federal funding. They can't withhold federal funding once Congress appropriates the money. I think we saw this with the wall. The President cannot contradict what Congress has intended to do with funding. To me, that is a message that the President can't do that. When we allocate federal funding for education, which of course comes in many forms, IDEA, Title I, the Title IV grants under the Every Student Succeeds Act, that's money that Congress is saying needs to go out to the schools. And then of course there was the additional funding through CARES and the other coronavirus bills. There was some suggestion that the President was going to have the CDC change the guidelines for students. Now I understand today, unless things have changed in the last couple of hours, the CDC is not going to do that. So we need to be working with our healthcare professionals, with our educators, and with our families, not listening to the President of the United States tell us that schools have to open. So I don't know if that answered your question, Representative Doherty. This is, of course, evolving on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of it is just trying to distract attention from the allegations that Russia is paying a bounty on U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and the President doesn't want us to keep focused on that. So he's trying to distract us with different things every day. And he's also sort of in denial about the reality of the pandemic. So every day is a new surprise. And again, my concern is we are not going to send our students back into schools like they were before. We have to make accommodations. We have to make sure that they can be safe and that our educators and all the support staff can be safe as well. It's going to take resources and it's going to take some time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kurt.
I was just going to say that, I would not pay a whole lot of attention to what Trump and DeVos say. I mean, they're a caricature of people that theoretically should be leading our nation. And I would listen to the members of Congress. I pay attention to McConnell and Pelosi if you want to get a bellwether on what actually is going on. I don't think you get anybody that's going to agree to withhold funding for schools. I happen to believe we should be opening schools. Kids are not the risk. We may need to make sure that teachers and classified staff are safe, and the folks that are at home that may be older need to be safe. But I'm a big proponent for letting the younger generation get back and learn. I'm very concerned with one of the things that came out of the truncated spring session was the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Those that had access to broadband, those that had functional families, those that were not homeless, maybe did okay with some of the internet access. But in my district, the 5th Congressional District, it's not unusual to have 60 to 70% free and reduced lunch. And school districts worked hard. My teachers worked extremely hard trying to get to those students, but 30% of those kids could not be reached. And so we've got to find a way to open them up in a smart and safe way, as Suzanne pointed out, and make sure the kids can actually go to school so their parents can go back to work so they can resume some sort of normality. But I would not count on the president to give us that guidance. I would count on Congress and hopefully stronger members of the CDC.
Thank you. A question from one of our board members, Vicki Chamberlain, is asking if Congress is likely to consider the birth control issue that has resulted from today's Supreme Court action to allow employers to opt out of coverage.
Oh, I sure hope so. I mean, that was incredibly frustrating. This is 2020 and we're still talking about access to contraception, and that should be a debate. Employers should not be deciding whether someone has access to coverage for birth control. It's absurd. So I would hope so. I know a lot of those issues go through the committee on which Kurt serves, so you might want to weigh in on that. I was disappointed with that decision, but we'll do everything I can. We know when there's access to contraception, that's helps with, you know, saying to a woman, you get to decide when and whether to bear a child, and we know access. That Kurt talked about the equity issues, and it's disproportionately affecting low-income women of color. I was frustrated with that and disappointed, and would like to see us do what we can to help fill those gaps.
I agree with Suzanne. The problem we're going to have is the United States Senate. And so the elections matter, to our earlier discussion, and we've got to flip the Senate. We've got to actually get a new president of the United States that cares about people and understands that this is the best way to ensure, you know, people have a choice to make the decisions that work best for them and their families.
Thank you. Senator Wagner has a question. Senator, you're unmuted. I hope I did.
Oh, hey.
Okay.
No,
Who's that young guy?
No, you're actually.
Recognize that. Who's that?
Yeah. Thanks. That's
Bob Wagner.
Yeah. It's a few years old. A little more gray now. No, my quib to Veronica here was a little bit tongue in cheek, but we're about to head into our next special session in a few weeks, and a lot of it is dependent on what's happening out of the hopefully HEROES Act. Do you have any sense? I know it's asking you to prognosticate on things that you don't have a lot of control on, but do you have a sense of what a package might be looking like? Are there any particulars that you think that the Republican leadership in the Senate might coalesce around? And then also just on timing, do you have an idea on when we might be seeing something?
It's really dangerous to make predictions in this business, but I'll do my best. The House passed the HEROES Act in May. Had many provisions, but I think one of the most important is the support for state and local governments. I served in Salem in 2009. I know the challenges of trying to balance a budget when revenues are down, and they're down. It's interesting because we hear from our colleagues who are from sales tax states, like, oh, we don't have enough revenue because people aren't buying things. And there's, well, we're an income tax state. We don't have enough revenue because people aren't working. So until people can fully get back to work and the revenue can come back up, we absolutely need to make sure that we are helping the state and local governments. There was some help in some of the earlier bills that went through, but it was very restrictive and only applied to unanticipated future coronavirus expenses. So I think this is an issue where the senators are starting to hear from across the country, from mayors, from local elected officials on both sides of the aisle. You know, first Mitch McConnell said, let him go bankrupt. I think somebody's going to regret saying that. It's a terrible idea. Hopefully they're hearing from enough local elected officials from around the country saying, look, when our police or firefighters, our first responders, our local services, when those are all getting cut, we're going to have a real problem in our communities. We're going to hear from our constituents that the local services cannot be met, the local needs cannot be met. So my prediction is that they'll take a piece of the they won't pass the whole HEROES Act as it is, to be sure, but they'll take a piece of it out, and that piece is likely to include the state and local funding. I certainly hope so, and I'll continue to push for it. I know there's been campaigns across the country. I know Speaker Pelosi's been talking about it nonstop. We've had a lot of effort to get that message through, that it's important. There's another direct payment. I just got off the phone with somebody this afternoon, a constituent, who's been for 13 weeks without unemployment and still backed up at the state level. People are still struggling because they don't have their unemployment, and that direct payment, that one-time direct payment helped, but some people still don't have it. They don't have their unemployment. Of course, the payment didn't go to everyone. I know the state stepped up. Thank you, Senator and Representative, for the Oregon Worker Relief Fund, but there's still a lot of unmet need and people struggling. Rent assistance as well. I know Oregon, thank you again to our state legislators. Oregon passed rent assistance, but that's going to expire. That's a 6-month reprieve. And if people are still 6 months from now unable to work, I hope that's not the case. But if it is, we're going to see a housing crisis that's exacerbated.
So my take, Rob, is that HEROES Act is pretty much DOA over on the Senate side. But Suzanne, I think, is exactly correct that the state and local package has real legs. Senator Cassidy from Louisiana, Senator Menendez from New Jersey have a bipartisan bill. It's not, $1 trillion. That was a little over the top, but it's, I think, in the $500 billion range, which is a huge amount of money by anyone's stretch of the imagination. We'll probably end up somewhere between 250 and 500. We've got a companion bill, again bipartisan, with Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey and Tom Reed from New York. I'm trying to drum up support for liability protections in the House. My leadership's not keen on that, but that's the deal. And I think both workers and businessmen want to know if it's safe to go back to work. What are the standards? I think school superintendents, teachers, and parents want to know what the standards are, although I'm not sure we can do too much at the federal level for schools. And our healthcare providers want to know, as well as patients, is it safe to go back in? What are the rules of engagement? So I think liability issue is critical to actually getting the Senate to move forward with a good package that addresses not just the state and local stuff that, thank you guys, you stepped up early before we got our act together and did a lot of good work, but also some of the fixes we need to the CARES Act, some of the stuff we want to continue, some of the stuff that we maybe want to not continue, lessons learned going forward. But as far as timing, school's trying to make decisions right now. I know you guys are trying to make decisions right now. I don't see a lot of new movement here. We'll see. But I think you're going to have to go ahead. I would assume, making assumptions is not a good way to go about things, but I think there'll be some aid. I just can't tell you when it's going to be, but it'll probably be, maximally in the 250, 500 range. And that'll be spread across the country. Oregon's 1%. We usually get federal money. So if you have to make plans, that might be the best you can do at this point.
Thank you. A question that was submitted earlier, the Paycheck Protection Program created a tax-free forgivable loan program for small businesses, providing that they use the funds within a specific window for specific purposes. While the IRS has ruled that the loan proceeds are not taxable, the business expenses for which the funds must be used will not be deductible for tax purposes. So functionally, it makes the loans taxable. Have you been hearing anything about this, and is there any discussion going on to reconsider this administrative rule?
I haven't heard that. Something that we should look into. Suzanne, have you heard anything?
I've heard a lot about the Paycheck Protection Program, but I haven't heard that one particular concern. I did hear a lot of concerns about, the first tranche of money going to, the Shake Shacks and the Ruth Chris's and the Lakers. And then the second time we went back and sort of made some corrections and directed some of the funding to the smaller CDFIs and credit unions for the minority-owned, women-owned businesses, for example. And then there's also been a call for more transparency, and we've seen, I think, just within the last couple of days, there's been a release of some information from the Treasury about which businesses got how much, and that transparency is important, but I haven't heard the particular concern that was raised, and be happy to look into it. They're supposed to be forgivable. The loan is supposed to turn into a forgivable loan, or essentially a grant, if the conditions are followed.
And even if they're not followed, Jesus, the interest rate's like 1%. It's like free money.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
So it's a pretty good deal.
A question came in: what can municipalities do to keep people safe but keep businesses going and downtowns alive? What needs do we need to emphasize? I'm trying to read the question. So what is Congress hoping that cities will be doing to keep people safe and keep the businesses going?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and cities play an important role, as do counties, as do states. But coronavirus doesn't know boundaries. It doesn't know if it's in Columbia County or Yamhill County or Washington County or Springfield, Illinois, or Springfield, Oregon. And so because there aren't any boundaries, you really need national leadership. Cities, when the county by county approach, I understand counties are different, but unless we keep people in those counties, we aren't really addressing the needs. And so it really is, do we have adequate testing to make sure if someone needs to be tested, they can be tested? I was just talking to somebody today who said, we're not sure we have enough testing. Contact tracing, so there can be a follow-up if someone does test positive. And then the ability to isolate someone who tests positive. We've seen, of course, a disproportionate impact on our communities of color, the Latinx community, people of color. Oftentimes you're in the frontline jobs, and oftentimes living in households where if someone does test positive, they can't isolate. So it's being spread to other family members. So we have to have all of those pieces, enough testing, enough contact tracing, and enough isolation. And then people need to wear masks. I was reminded that early on, the Surgeon General said, don't wear masks in all capital letters because we need them for the first responders. But we've seen and have the science, so it does make a difference. And so we need to make sure that people are wearing masks. So all of those pieces are important. I truly hope that the investments that are being made in research for therapeutics and vaccination are going to pay off and quickly, but a vaccine cannot be developed rapidly. There needs to be some kind of trial. It's not safe if there's not a trial. So I'm all for expediting it, but you can't just skip that step. So until that happens, we need to have the testing, the contact tracing, the isolation, and people really need to wear masks.
Thank you. Kurt, anything?
Well, I think that's good advice, very, very good advice. And, I just think we've got to keep it in perspective. We have lost perspective on the COVID virus. It's an upper respiratory virus. 80% of us are going to be fine, not require any medical assistance at all. We need to focus, as I said earlier, on that 15 to 20%. That's the smart way. That's something that we might be able to financially afford. That's where we could actually control small segments of the population's attitudes and behaviors. And to Suzanne's exact point, we do need to do our part, masks indoors, and it's the only way Oregon's going to survive. I'm very, very, very concerned that not just our cities, but rural Oregon right now is at risk if we try and pretend we're a bunch of cowboys and going to do whatever we want because we're Americans. You disrespect your neighbor when you do that. And what we need to do is keep our businesses open, keep the hospitals functioning, elective procedures. They're oftentimes the biggest employer in rural America. And if they're not allowed to function normally, they're going to go under. We had a tranche of money, or our state legislators put a tranche of money out there for our local hospitals. Same thing, we can't even get the big 3 counties in Oregon open. The governor's linked them all together, and that's a problem. We all have to do our part to make sure that people feel safe going out there. And I think we've gotten way over concerned in one respect, and in the other, there's a small group of people that unfortunately disrespect the actual disease itself, and that's always a huge mistake. So let's keep it all in perspective, folks, and conduct your lives, but do it smartly and safely. And like mask indoors is a small price to pay. And great state of Oregon, we'd love to be outdoors anyway.
We have a kind of personal question. It's election season, so we've heard and we'll continue to hear a lot about your many successes in office. And this is probably good for our candidates. Would you tell us about a failure and what you learned from it? So something you tried to do and didn't quite succeed on. Who wants to go first? I see quiet here. Suzanne, go first.
Not smart to talk about your failures. Your opponent's very good at pointing those out. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with Kurt. I mean, I think, you know, there's certainly been times when I aimed high and tried to get a bill through when I was in the minority and was very, very frustrated and couldn't do it. But the reality is, you know, when we do the best we can given the circumstances, we have to aim high I'm just thinking of an example of a science committee bill that I worked so hard on and eventually got it through, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so that you know, you have to be able to compromise, and I did, but it was disappointing. I don't know if I'd call it a failure. So okay. That's a tough question.
Thanks. There was a specific question about a bill related to civics training that I think there's a House bill that maybe has gotten a little buried, but it's would to amend the Elementary and Secondary Education Act to prioritize innovative civics learning and teaching and to provide some additional funds for that civics education program. Do you know where that is, Suzanne?
I don't know where that particular bill is, but I do know that, you know, as a member of the Education and Labor Committee, I played a significant part in getting rid of No Child Left Behind and passing the Every Student Succeeds Act, which puts more focus on well-rounded education. It is not up to the government to decide curriculum. That is done by school boards, and rightly so. But big supporter of well-rounded education. And we absolutely know we need more civics education. When you see these, you know, quizzes and people don't understand the 3 branches of government or can't recognize, you know, anybody on the Supreme Court, or, you know, answer some basic civics questions. We know that's really, really necessary. So I'd be happy to look at the bill. I was so very much looking forward to you know, following the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act to make sure it really did do what it was intended to do, which is that well-rounded education with more local decision making and fewer better assessments, and assessments used to inform instruction rather than to penalize schools, and et cetera. But then we got Secretary DeVos, and so it's been a real challenge, and we're kind of in this uphill battle with the attempts to privatize public education instead of focusing on what we really need is you know, educating our students today to be critical thinkers for the future, and that's what's needed. So I'm a big fan of civics education. Not sure it's something that Congress should be setting as curriculum, but definitely supportive.
Agreed.
I know I saw some headlines just the other day, but it seems like PPE for frontline workers and test kits and all those issues are still problematic, especially as we've seen the recent surges across the South and here in the West. Is there any place that Congress can come in and help with some of that, or are we just stuck with the lack of leadership at the top?
Well, I think we are definitely working on that. I know Suzanne and I stay in touch with our folks here in Oregon. Knock on wood, we're in a better spot than some of these other states that have just opened up, you know, randomly, and they've seen huge surges that are now testing their eyes. Talking to a buddy of mine down in California, their ICUs are full outside of Orange County. It's really not good. And Texas, Florida, similar situations. We've been smarter. I think Governor Brown's done a great job, a fantastic job, in balancing the diverse interests of our very diverse state, and coming along slowly but surely. But we need at the national level, and we had a hearing about a month ago about PPE, and what's the problem? Do we go overseas? Do we keep it all here? And the answer is there's probably some sort of hybrid where we'll get some of our PPE from overseas, but we need to build our own infrastructure in that regard. Work with our manufacturers here in this country. There are folks, there's an outfit here in Salem that is now manufacturing gowns for Salem Hospital, for instance, and looking to expand that with it is very virus resistant, if you will. So there's great opportunity, and we're looking at that in our Commerce Committee. I think one of the things that we should do after this horrible epidemic is do what we didn't do back when President Bush was the president, and suggested with some of the pandemics that they were beginning to face, that we should build up a serious stockpile for a national disaster, not just pockets, but a national disaster, and incorporate elements of local manufacture with some trading, because I think you still want to trade overseas. That's how you keep conflicts at a minimum, make your friends, if you will, dependent on you a little bit for their own welfare. There's less likely to be internecine warfare then. But we still want to make sure that in a pinch, we can turn things up if we need to. And to do that, we're going to have a consistent source of PPE gear. The testing is a big issue. It's probably a bigger issue right now in my state, at least my district. And we're looking at making sure those reagents, supplies, swabs, syringes, basic stuff also could be manufactured here in this country.
Yeah, I agree with with Kurt about the importance of ramping up some U.S. manufacturing. I had and I just had a conversation today with two different people, one a county commissioner and one firefighter chief, about concerns about PPE now that we're not seeing the numbers go down like they need to. I had have an assisted living facility in the 1st Congressional District, and they were trying to get enough PPE for their staff, and this was probably a month or two ago. And they had ordered some from overseas, and it came in through Alaska, and then Customs and Border Patrol stopped it in Alaska. And so then we had to help intervene and get them to release it. And, maybe it didn't meet all the US qualifications, but he said, look, we've got these, nursing home residents stitching their own masks. This has got to be better than that. So let it through. So, they shouldn't be in that situation. They should be able to have access to the PPE they need for their residents and their staff. And that's true everywhere. With things like ventilators, I applaud Governor Brown for, once we got the ventilators we needed and had enough, sending them to New York where they really did need them. There was this supply, this federal supply that was depleted pretty rapidly, and a lot of the stuff was expired in his national stockpile. We need to do a better job of making sure that if there's a national stockpile, that it's actually stocked and that it's equitably distributed when states need it. But U.S. manufacturing, I was really glad to see a lot of our companies step up and start making some PPE. Nike, ADEX, some of the businesses were really stepping up and helping when the need is there.
And a last question. In the best case scenario that we maintain control of the House and take back the Senate and elect Joe Biden, what would you say is the most important first orders of business moving into 2021? Maybe your top 3, like, if you could just go to Nancy Pelosi and say, okay, Nancy, 1, 2, 3, this is what I think we should be doing. What would be on that list?
All right, you can go first.
Well, I'd say I'd like to do things. I learned a lesson back in 2009 and 10 when you hold all the levers of power and you wield it unilaterally, it can come back to bite you. And so I guess I would lead off with infrastructure. Let's get that bill across the finish line. Peter Fazio has done a great job There's some green energy, green transportation initiatives in there that I think are great. And I think there are a lot of other states, even in the Midwest and the South, that will benefit from that. Let's have a conversation. Let's move that across the finish line. The healthcare thing, I think the ACA needs some improvement. We've got a lot of Republican support for the ACA, believe it or not, anymore. They talk one talk, but without Trump there, in my committee anyway, they all realize that we need to have access to affordable healthcare for everybody. There are a lot of fixes that we could do that I think could be easy to do. And then I selfishly would like to pass my climate change bill. You know, we've got to get the power plants down to zero emissions. I've got a Republican on board. I got businesses and environmental groups. Let's make a step in that direction. I think our committee's pushing really hard. Those would be three big initiatives I think that would be really, really important, and hopefully instill a little faith in America that we can still get that job done.
That's a great list, Kurt. And I agree with the healthcare, infrastructure, and climate change, and how we do that. You know, I've never served in the majority with a president who's a Democrat, so I'm really looking forward to it. I was in the minority for many years with President Obama, and I tell you, the 2 years when I was in the minority with Republican control in both chambers and Trump, that was every day seemed like an eternity. There, a lot of defense, and then of course this Congress in the majority. But in addition, I really want to add that we're going to need to restore our standing in the world. It's really a concern. I had a conversation yesterday with people who work on global issues, global poverty, global hunger. Those are really important issues for us as a country. We're still the United States of America, and a country where, even though we have our own challenges, if we don't step up and make sure that we are paying attention to our role as part of the globe, as a global citizen, it just leads to more conflicts and more problems. So that is added to the list, along with climate change and infrastructure, green infrastructure, and healthcare. And if I can add one more, I've been working so hard on education issues from pre-K through higher education, make our system of public education equitable, make it work for every student, and expand those opportunities for a good quality early childhood education, a robust, equitable K-12 system, and debt-free higher education.
Well, that is all wonderful things to look forward to. And we are all going to be really working hard to make this a good blue wave in November, and make it possible for you to achieve very worthy goals. I want to thank both Congresswoman Bonamici and Congressman Schrader for taking an hour today to spend with us, and lots of wonderful questions. I think I got to most of them, although not all, but just very pleased to be able to have you both. I want to tell everybody on the line that on July 22nd, our summer salon will be pleased to welcome candidates for Metro and County Commission positions. Joining us will be Garrett Rosenthal, who's the candidate for Metro Councilor District 3, which covers Tigard, Tualatin, Sherwood, and South Beaverton. Ken Humbertson, who is the candidate for Clackamas County Commissioner, position 4. And Nafisa Fai, who is the candidate for Washington County Commissioner, District 1, which is much of Beaverton, Aloha, Cooper Mountain, and Reedville. So we look forward to seeing you on Zoom on July 22nd. And thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Kurt. I think he's off.
Thanks, everybody.
You're very welcome. Take care.
Veronica, did you want me to put up those graphics?
Oh, I forgot. Well,
Oh, I'm still recording. We're still here.
okay. Let's put them on the recording.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put them up. Okay, so here is, hold on.
You probably have to cut some of this out.
There we go. There's Congressman Schrader's. Do you see it? Is
Yes.
it there? Okay, I'll leave it up for a minute if anybody wants to take note of the phone number or whatever.
Okay.
And should I switch to the other one?
Yes.
And there is Suzanne's. So if anybody wants to get in touch with them, that's how you do it.
Okay. Excellent. I think we've lost most people, but I think if we put these are on the back of our thing. It's my fault for not writing it in my notes.
That's okay. All right, if you would stay on, I want to talk to you for a second.
Okay. I only have.
And then should I go ahead and close it out?
Yeah.
Okay, let me, okay, goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Maybe throw some people on there.
Can you guys hear me? It's Claudia.
I can hear you. Just a minute, Rosie. We got stuff going on. Just a second.